Okay, how about this one? If only I had inspected the property and talked to the seller before I completed the agent visual inspection disclosure. The agent visual inspection disclosure is required not by law, not by statute, but by good common business practices. The agent visual inspection disclosure is the vehicle that we use to make our disclosures known to the buyer, and in fact to the seller, because the seller signs it as well. So it's 3 pages, and our job, our responsibility, is to make sure that we read page 1, which is my personal favorite page. The reason I like page 1 of the agent visual inspection disclosure, does anyone know the reason? Have you heard me say it before? No. I love it because it tells you all the things you're not going to do. It tells the buyer and it tells the seller all the things you are not going to be doing and all the areas you will not be inspecting. For that reason, I would say to you, read it carefully and don't do what it says you won't do. Don't cross the line, because you're not supposed to go in the attic. You're not supposed to go in the crawl space. You're not supposed to test the appliances. You are supposed to perform a reasonably diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas and then commit your findings to writing. That's what you are supposed to do. And by the way, the Civil Code tricks us a little bit because it says a reasonably diligent visual. You all remember that, visual? But it really doesn't mean just visual, does it? Because it's what we hear, along with what we see, and it's what we know, and it's what we smell. It's all of our senses. So when it comes to the agent visual inspection, it's common sense above all. It's using all the olfactory senses. And I give you my best example is I have a property, perhaps it's near a train track, right? I can't see the tracks, and I can't see the train. But every day at 2 o'clock when I visit my listing, the entire house vibrates. Now I can't visually see that train and I don't visually see the tracks, but I know there's something going on and I've got to disclose that. So the key to the agent visual inspection disclosure is really understanding the limitations of our obligations, then making our tour of the property, and I like the old-fashioned right wall inspection. That old right wall, you walk in the front door and you turn right and you just keep turning right all through the house, up the stairs, down the hallways. You will miss nothing. I learned that from Hugh Holbert. One of the old timers might remember Hugh. He was a great trainer, great guy. He was an attorney that worked for a title company, and he was the king of the right wall inspections. And it works to this day. You'll never miss anything in the property. You have your inspection, you perform it, and you make your notations, and you disclose what you see, what you know, what you smell, what you hear. And if the seller tells you something, because you're going to be communicating with the seller as part of your agent visual inspection disclosure, tells you something about the property that he failed to disclose in the TDS or in the seller property questionnaire, there's a place for you to make third-party disclosures on the agent visual inspection disclosure, and you'll remember, cite the source, give the information, indicate that you can't verify it, and suggest that the buyer investigate. That way you're using the appropriate vehicle for your disclosures. Yes?
Sometimes we see other agents' agent visual inspection disclosure that will say lovely crystal chandelier and just rave about all the positives about the property. But I remember Jeff telling us just to really focus on the negatives. So I'm asking you.
Here's what I say about that. The transfer disclosure statement, the agent visual inspection disclosure, is not a marketing vehicle. It is not the place where you're going to talk about all the amenities, benefits, and value of the property. I don't care if it has custom wallpaper. That's not going on the agent visual inspection disclosure. I don't care anything about the decor of the property. And by the way, we will never indicate that the property is structurally sound. Right? Ask my former boss, Fred Sands, about that. We had some condos in Santa Monica that were represented as structurally sound, right? Superior construction throughout. And when they caved in a couple years later, our marketing pieces were used, right, in court. And to make it worse, the agent that had the listings was also a partner of the development company. So that was a bad lawsuit. That was settled, obviously. You don't take those to court. But those things happen in the real brokerage world, so we don't make those kinds of comments. We focus, sadly, on the negative. So Jeff is absolutely right. We focus on the negative. We talk about the things that would affect the buyer's decision to buy the property or the price the buyer is willing to pay. Yes?
Good question. I don't like climbing up on ladders. What do you do when the seller, you know, when your agent, here's my drop ladder for my attic, because I broke my wrist once. I do not like it.
Okay, wait. Time out. Why would you be climbing up a ladder as a real estate agent?
What a seller does. I've had this happen time and time again. Look at my nice drop ladder in the hallway. You know how they have the drop ladder for extra?
Yes.
They pull it down and they say, take a look up there. It looks great.
You say, but that's your personal choice. You say, no, thank you, Mr. Seller. I don't climb an attic.
We don't have to do that.
No. If you read page 1 of the agent visual inspection disclosure, it tells you you're not going in the attic.
Well, no, I didn't.
No, you don't have to. No one can make you climb up a ladder but you. Only you can make yourself climb up a ladder. You've been doing the right thing by saying no. Do not climb up ladders. Say Kathy Mehringer said I should not. Buyers can't make you climb up ladders either, and I wouldn't let the buyer climb up the ladder. Yeah. We have to be thoughtful in terms of liability. By the way, since we're talking about this, real case, Northern California, not a drop-down ladder, but the physical inspector was at the property, and he put his extension ladder in the crawl space. He went up into the crawl space. The buyers went up with him.
Why?
I don't know, but they went. The listing agent was down below, feeling a little bit sad that everyone was up in the attic having fun. And the ladder happened to be, believe it or not, an old wood extension ladder. And she was a woman of stature. And she got up to about the 4th rung, and the ladder broke. And her leg broke. And her cell phone skittered away from her. And she couldn't get to her cell phone to call 911 for quite some time till she crawled there. And the people, the buyers, and I'm not smiling. That was not a smile. The buyers and the home inspector were stuck in the attic. Everybody's suing everybody. The listing agent's suing her seller, the seller's suing the listing agent, the home inspector's suing, because the buyers were stressed and had, you know, angst and depression and fear and anxiety up in the attic because they were there for a certain amount of time. So when you talk about ladders, dear, no ladders. No one goes up ladders. We'll have no ladders. The question is, how do I feel about a buyer not being at the inspection? I don't feel good about that. I would want the buyers at the inspection, yes, because I don't think that the agent, the real estate agent, either that represents seller or buyer, wants to own the responsibility of being the one to discuss with the buyer what the physical inspector might have said or done outside what's in the written report. So I would much rather the buyer be there so that when the inspector says, oh, there's an issue with the hot water heater strapping, it's this, it's not quite right, but it does meet code, let the buyer ask the questions. Let the buyer do their due diligence. So I personally, and there's no rule on this or law that governs it. I just say from a common sense perspective, I would want the buyer there. And sometimes it's good when the sellers are there. Sellers want to know what the condition of their home is. Certainly they don't need to be there, but you would want the agents and the buyer there.
So would you tell your buyer, don't follow the guy up into the attic?
Yes, I would say, Mr. Buyer, I would not recommend it. And in fact, if you're going to climb up the ladder, here's a waiver I just happen to have read. Sign it on my iPad. It's my standard do not go up the ladder waiver, right? Because you don't want to be the one saying, well, my agent told me to go up the ladder, right? And I never really thought ladders were an issue, but apparently they are. So, and I just told a story about a ladder, so I guess ladders can be very dangerous. Yes?
Comment about whether or not you think it's important for listing agents to be at home inspections for their properties.
Okay, so the question, first we have the question of should the buyers be at the home inspection, and I think yes, they should be. the next question is, well, what about the listing agent? Should the listing agent be present for the physical inspection? And again, I don't think there's any set protocol on this, certainly no law that governs it. I would say it depends. If the listing agent is the one opening the property, if you've got it by appointment only and the listing agent is opening the property, I would think they would want to be there. If the seller's going to be there, I would think the seller would expect the listing agent to be there. If the property's on a key box, and if the listing agent isn't able to be there at the time that the buyer and the buyer's inspector can be there, I don't have a lot of angst about that. I don't get upset about it one way or the other. I think it really depends on the circumstances, it depends on the timing, and it depends really on the seller's expectation of their agent, what the seller expects from their real estate agent. And by the way, I would be having that dialogue with my seller at the time I interviewed for the listing. I'd be, you know, kind of delving into what your expectations are of me and what service I'm going to be providing to you. And if you set that groundwork to the extent you can, because there's always variables, it's kind of good to do it at that time. Yes?
I recently had a buyer's agent ask me if I could put a combo box on the listing so that the inspector and the buyer could go in because she couldn't be there. Furnished house. And I said, you know, I require that a licensed realtor accompany your buyer and that inspector into my client's home.
And I'm glad you did, because do you know what? It's a serious violation of the MLS rules to let anyone into the property that isn't a licensed real estate broker and a member of that MLS.
Even vacant properties,
No,
you do not let your buyer and the inspector in and leave.
But that's more than good sense. That's an MLS violation. You cannot allow people access to listed property without supervision of a real estate licensee. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
I'm going to ask, if the seller has, they tell you, we have finished the whole inside of the attic for extra storage, so it's like a selling point, and they have a pull-down ladder.
We're still on the ladder. We cannot get away from the ladder. I want all of this erased. Jeff, I want all the ladder discussion erased from the video, okay? Okay, now, a different scenario and a very good one. Now we have an attic that's been enhanced for storage. Maybe there's lights up there, there's plywood, maybe some shelving, and the seller wants the buyer to see it because it is a selling point. Maybe they put their kids up there when they're not good, I don't know, but it's something up there. And now the seller wants the buyer to see it. Who do I represent in your scenario? Tell me who I represent and I'll give you my answer.
You
Might be different.
represent the buyer.
The seller, because you have to put
I represent the seller. Then I'm going to say, Mr. Seller, I want to make sure your homeowner's insurance is up to date and that your liability coverage will cover the buyer when he falls out of your attic, trips in the attic, hits his head, gets a concussion. I want to make sure before you start demonstrating this attic to the buyer, I want to make sure your liability insurance is in place. I'm going to confirm that in writing. Because now I want to make sure that the seller understands that when you have people climbing up on ladders, you have the potential for all the problems that we've talked about today. So that's what I would do. So if a buyer wants to see it, I can't stop the buyer from seeing it. If a seller says, this is my attic, I converted it, there's the ladder, Mr. Buyer, go up and take a look, and the buyer wants to do it, I can't do much about it, right? All I can do is verify and document and not blow a deal, right? Because the buyer and seller have agreed they want to go, and the seller may want to go up with them and show them around.
But are you going to put it in your listing that the owner has enhanced the attic for all this extra storage?
Well, I don't know. Does the owner want me to put it in the listing? I mean, does the owner want to say attic has been enhanced to accommodate additional storage? Why not? Yeah, why
There's nothing
not?
wrong with that.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. My problem was with the ladder. Not with the attic.